Revealed. After 2 years of deception, I made a life-changing switch to expose his hidden betrayal. Sarah stared out her kitchen window, watching the evening sky fill with hues of orange and purple. It was another summer night in Ohio, where fireflies flickered like tiny stars. Jake and Lily giggled in the backyard, their laughter weaving through the air as the smells of burger patties filled her home. It was family, warmth, and the thrill of belonging, everything she craved. But as she prepped her meal prep orders from home, a strange sensation prickled at her heart, as if something was ready to unravel. Deep down she sensed that change was approaching. How could she know that night would turn everything she thought she knew upside down? For 2 years Mark had been a steady figure in their lives. The charming handyman next door. He was more than just the guy who fixed broken pipes. He brought laughter to their dinner table and warmth to their hearts. Mark could make a rainy day feel like a sunny one, and that sparkle in his eye was contagious. But as Sarah cradled her steaming pots, doubts danced like shadows in her mind. It wasn't just about him being her neighbor. He was her rock. She couldn't afford to lose him or what he represented, a flicker of stability in her chaotic world. But life has a way of ripping off the blindfolds, revealing harsh truths. When she stumbled upon a bank statement tucked in Mark's old toolbox, her heart dropped. The numbers screamed deception, a world away from her modest struggles. What was a loyal friend doing with extravagant expenditures? The betrayal struck her like an unexpected storm, throwing her off her feet. Anger ignited in her chest as she confronted Mark. She could feel her heart racing, the tightness in her throat threatening to choke back tears. "How could you?" The words came out harsher than she intended, surprised even herself. Before Sarah could collect her thoughts, Mark flashed that familiar smile. "I can explain," he said with a hint of charm still intact. But she couldn't shake the feeling that his words were as empty as the promises she once believed. Just moments before, they shared moments of laughter and warmth. Now that space felt cold and alien. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the community they built around them, Sarah felt a spark igniting. The anger brewed something fierce within. She would not let betrayal go unchallenged. As whispers of Mark's manipulations began to rise, Sarah transformed into a champion for her neighborhood. She was small, sure, but her heart became a fortress of resilience. She saw mothers, fathers, neighbors, and friends rally around her, sharing their stories and collective grief. The tightness in her chest began to lift, fueled by unity and purpose. The stakes grew higher as she planned a pivotal gathering. There would be no silence, no pain tucked away. The community was coming together to confront Mark, to reclaim their trust and dignity. But then doubt crept in, a flickering light in her mind. Was Mark a villain? Couldn't compassion and justice walk hand in hand? Heart pounding, she stood at the precipice of her decision. As the room buzzed with anticipation, she faced her neighbors, her community, a moment far larger than her own worries. Would she condemn, or could she find the strength to forgive? The air thickened with tension, waiting for her next move, leaving everyone hanging on the edge of an impossible choice. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Sarah's heart raced like a drumbeat in her chest. She stood in front of the cluster of familiar faces, some filled with hope, others marred by doubt. Mark's betrayal stung deeper than she had anticipated, and now this moment felt surreal. The laughter that once rang through her home was replaced by tense whispers and shifting glances. Would they support her, or were they just as unsure of Mark as she was? "Thank you all for being here," she finally managed, her voice shaking. "We need to talk about Mark." The words hung heavy in the air, a sentence charged with impending tension. She could feel their energy shift, the room almost vibrating with anticipation, like a bowstring pulled taut. "What did he do?" An older neighbor, Mrs. Langston, spoke up, her voice quaking with the vulnerability of someone who invested time and trust into Mark. Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself. "I found this," she blurted out, almost throwing the statement at them like a lifeline. She held up the bank statement she'd discovered, its glaring numbers reflecting back at her a testament to the deceit layered beneath their friendship. He has been spending money he hasn't earned. Money that doesn't match the kind of life he led here. Some gasps echoed, eyes widening. The collective disbelief pricked at the edges of Sarah's own heart. Could he be taking from us? From the neighborhood? Another neighbor chimed in, the fear hanging thick. Is he even who we think he is? Came a voice from the back, resonating with suppressed hurt and rising anger. Burdened by the weight of their skepticism, doubt swept through Sarah like a cold draft. She knew all too well what they were thinking. Was Mark really the person they had welcomed into their lives? Could their shared moments of laughter be part of a cruel ruse? Listen, she said, raising a hand to quell the rising murmurs. Isn't he just a neighbor? He has been part of our lives for 2 years. But this, what I found, it changes everything. Mark had put down roots. He had earned their laughter and trust like currency. But here they stood, teetering on the edge of a precipice, ready to either lock arms and confront or turn their backs in disbelief. Sarah felt a tear escape from her eye, betraying the fire ignited within her. It was more than just betrayal. It was a disembowelment of a shared world she believed was real. I need to know how to handle this. I need your support, your voices to stand together. The room fell silent, pulsating with an understanding deeper than words. Their shared vulnerability clung to the air like the smell of rain on pavement, a painful yet profound awakening. I want to help. Lily's soft voice broke into the silence, her eyes wide and earnest. But maybe we shouldn't decide until we hear from him? Sarah felt conflicted. Her instincts screamed to confront, but Lily's plea resonated in the quiet of her heart. Was this her moment to judge? Or could it be one for empathy? Okay, Sarah finally replied. Let us invite Mark to talk. But if we do this, I need us all to be prepared for the truth, whatever it is. As her neighbors nodded, heavy with the weight of the decision, Sarah wondered. Would confronting him give closure or reopen wounds? What would the truth reveal, the monster behind the mask or a man caught in a web of his own making? Her heart raced, knowing they were inches away from everything she had always believed. And yet she stood firm, ready to face whatever storm awaited them. Would Mark be their greatest adversary or an equally wounded soul searching for redemption? The tension hung in the air like thick fog, adding to the feeling that they were all teetering on a knife edge of uncertainty. And Sarah, determined but fearful, felt the clock ticking down to a confrontation that would either shatter their tight-knit community or bind them together in unexpected ways. What awaited them in the shadows of truth? That night, as darkness settled over the neighborhood, Sarah lay awake, her mind swirling with questions. The flicker of streetlights outside illuminated her room in sharp flashes, like moments of clarity against the overwhelming uncertainty. Mark had been a part of her life for so long. The memories flashed across her mind: a barbecue last summer, Halloween with the kids, winter nights filled with laughter. How could someone she trusted betray her in such a profound way? As the clock ticked away, Sarah imagined the conversation with Mark that loomed ahead. How would she address the deception? Would he deny it outright, or would he show a vulnerability that she'd never seen before? Her stomach twisted in knots, feeling the weight of anticipation heavy in her chest. The next day, she gathered her neighbors again. The air buzzed with unease, conversations fragmenting into startled whispers whenever someone mentioned Mark. They sat in her living room, faces drawn, tension palpable. Lily, with her steady gaze and calming presence, held Sarah's hand, grounding her as the moment approached. He said he would come, Sarah reminded everyone, trying to inject a hint of reassurance into the room. Yet, the uncertainty chased away the lingering hope. Would Mark stay true to his word? Or would he reveal himself as the fraud she feared he might be? A knock broke the silence, sending a ripple of anxiety through the group. Sarah swallowed hard and opened the door. There he stood, Mark, his face a mask of uncertainty. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of regret or perhaps denial. Thank you for coming, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The others watched him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity, their expressions shifting like the changing light outside. Sitting down, Mark scanned their faces, confusion evident. What's going on? He asked, his tone cautious. The question hung in the air like a pendulum, swaying between innocence and guilt. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears, But this was the moment. We've been talking, Mark, she began, trying to structure her words, but they felt heavier now that he was present. About everything about you. His brow furrowed, and he shifted uncomfortably. What do you mean? Another neighbor chimed in. It's about the money, Mark. The spending. The lies. The air thickened with anticipation, and Sarah glanced at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. Mark's face paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop right there, Sarah interrupted, firm but quaking inside. We found a bank statement, Mark. We know you've been spending money in ways that don't add up. There's something you need to tell us. For a moment the room held its collective breath, the reality settling like a dense fog. Would he fold under pressure? Or would he fight back, revealing more layers to his facade? I can explain, he finally said, his voice low. It's not what you think. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, urging her to listen. But doubt also crept in. Was this about to spiral into more lies? Her neighbors leaned in, eyes glued to Mark, each person grappling with their own feelings of betrayal and truth. Then explain, Sarah urged, her heart racing. Because we deserve to know who you really are. The vulnerability in her voice hung between them, a challenge and a plea wrapped in layers of uncertainty. As Mark took a deep breath, Sarah sensed that life in the community was about to shift dramatically. In that moment, she felt more alive than ever, ready to unearth whatever was hiding in the shadows. Even if the truth was ugly and painful, would it shatter them, or pave the way for a deeper understanding of what it really meant to trust one another? The truth felt like a live wire, and as Mark's story unfolded, Sarah knew things would never be the same again. What was it he had kept hidden all this time? Each lingering second felt like a countdown to revelation. Mark took a deep breath, searching for words that felt like they were stuck in his throat. The silence was deafening, everyone's eyes boring into him, judging, analyzing. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together as if they could anchor him to a reality that was slipping away. Look, I know you're all upset, he started, lowering his voice. And I understand why you feel betrayed. But there's more to this story. His eyes darted around the room, landing on Sarah. I didn't want to drag you all into my mess. Anger flared within Sarah, a fire igniting behind her eyes. You didn't think we deserved to know the truth? We trusted you. We let you into our lives. The frustration spilled out, raw and unfiltered. The weight of the situation pressed down harder as her neighbors shifted, their expressions a cocktail of anger and bewilderment. I had my reasons. Mark's voice rose slightly, spilling secrets his face had concealed. It's not what you think. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could handle it without your help. Handle what? Lily interjected, her calm demeanor slipping as she leaned forward. What exactly were you trying to handle, Mark? How deep does this go? Mark hesitated, swallowing hard. For a brief moment, he was just a man caught in his own lies. A glimmer of vulnerability flickered in his eyes. We're going through some financial issues. You know how tough things have been for everyone, he began slowly. I took some money from the community fund to pay off debts to keep everything running. I didn't want you to worry. Gasps broke out among them. Sarah's heart raced, a mix of betrayal and empathy. You took money from us? From our community? How could you do this? I thought I could get it back before anyone noticed. His voice strained, desperation leaking through. I had a plan. I could turn things around, but I kept digging myself deeper. The room felt smaller, the weight of his confession growing heavier, each breath taut with tension. Mark glanced at each person, gauging their reactions, pleading silently for their understanding. Sarah's mind raced. Did he think that somehow made it better? That admitting weakness would absolve him? Didn't you think we would have helped you? She said, her voice quieter now, almost tender. You didn't need to do this alone. I didn't want to burden you, he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. I thought it was easiest. I didn't know how to tell you. You all see me as someone strong. Someone who has it all together, and now? Lily asked softly, her eyes searching his. What do we see now? I'm scared, Mark finally admitted, the facade cracking like ice underfoot. I didn't realize how far I had fallen until it was too late. I just wanted to protect you. I thought I could manage everything myself. But now his voice trailed off, leaving an echo of uncertainty hanging in the air. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Everyone was processing anger, betrayal, sadness. Sarah caught Lily's glance, a shared understanding passing between them. Mark was not just the villain here. He was a man lost in his own mistakes. What do we do now? Sarah asked, her voice steadying, trying to find a path through the wreckage. How do we fix this? I don't know, Mark replied, his gaze falling. But I want to make it right. I just don't want to lose all of you in the process. As the weight of his confession settled, questions bubbled just beneath the surface of Sarah's thoughts. Could they rebuild from this betrayal? Even with the truth laid bare, would it be enough? Forgiveness was one thing. Trust was another. I need to think, Mark, she finally said, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. We all do. Mark nodded, the flicker of hope dimming in his eyes. The community had shifted, the bonds fraying. But in that moment of uncertainty, one thing became clear. The journey to rebuild would not be easy. As everyone began to disperse slowly, Sarah felt a new weight resting heavily on her shoulders. What were the next steps? Could they salvage their sense of community? The revelation hung in the air. A question barely whispered. What if the truth led them further apart instead of pulling them back together? Sarah walked home with a heavy heart. The crisp evening air felt foreign, as if it could somehow encapsulate the storm within her. Each step echoed with the voices from the meeting, their disappointment wrapping around her like a cold blanket. She paused for a moment, staring at the ground, trying to piece together the emotions swirling inside her. How could Mark have done this? She had always seen him as a cornerstone of their community, someone who stood firm and unyielding through life's trials. Yet here he was, a man crumbling beneath the weight of his own choices. It felt like a betrayal, not just of trust, but of the very fabric holding them all together. As she entered her house, the familiar sights brought no comfort. She glanced at the photographs hanging on the walls, snapshots of laughter and joy, families united, friends celebrating, memories of a time when her neighbors felt like family. But now everything felt tainted. The laughter felt like echoes of a different life. She slumped onto the couch, her mind racing. Mark had thought he was protecting them, but had he just propelled them into disarray? She imagined herself confronting him again. The weight of those stolen funds, the tiny lies that spiraled out of control. Part of her wanted to scream, how could he have been so foolish? But another part, a quieter part, whispered that maybe he was just scared. Scared, she murmured to herself. Wasn't he that something they all shared? She reached for her phone, intending to call Lily. If anyone could help make sense of this, it would be her. They had been through tough times together, turning to one another when faced with challenges. But as she hovered over Lily's name, she hesitated to know. They needed time. Time to unpack the layers of this betrayal. They had to approach this delicately. Community bonds were fragile and needed nurturing, not impulsive reactions. She placed the phone down, exhaling deeply as she tried to focus on what they could do next. Suddenly, a knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Who could it be at this hour? Heart racing, she walked to the door and opened it, revealing Sarah's neighbor, Mr. Thompson. His face wore a mask of concern, deeply etched lines of worry crinkling his forehead. Sarah, is everything all right? He asked, brow furrowed. I heard the meeting got intense. Yeah, you could say that, she said, stepping aside to let him in. It was a lot to process. He nodded, sitting down across from her, leaning forward. I know what Mark did was wrong, but it's important we don't rush to conclusions. We need to talk, to forge a plan together. We can't let one mistake tear us apart. His words hung in the air, amplifying an idea she hadn't considered yet. Perhaps they could unite and approach this as a community instead of individuals running with their emotions. You're right, she said, feeling a flicker of hope. We need to come together. Maybe we can find solutions that benefit everyone. They began brainstorming on how to address Mark's situation, how best to foster dialogue and recovery. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing thoughts about transparency, responsibility, and how to regain what they had lost. Each suggestion sparked ideas and possibilities, igniting a sense of teamwork as they filled the room with plans for meetings and potential solutions. Sarah felt the tension within her ease, just a little. Forgiveness was still a long road ahead, but unity could pave the way. Once the ideas were mapped out and a cohesive plan formed, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily asking her to meet first thing in the morning. Looks like I won't be able to sleep on this, Sarah said with a resigned laugh. Mr. Thompson smiled gently. Good. We need everyone on board. Together we can lift each other back up. As Sarah locked up for the night, a question hovered in her mind, ready to unravel at the break of dawn. Could they actually turn this around? Could they bring Mark back into the fold? Or was their community forever changed? And as she turned the lights off, darkness enveloping her home, she felt an uneasy anticipation. What awaited them on the other side of this confrontation? The morning light slipped through the curtains, casting a soft glow around Sarah's kitchen. She brewed a pot of coffee, her thoughts still tangled in the night's dilemma. Lily's message lingered in her mind like an unanswered question. What was she going to say? What could they possibly discuss that would untangle Mark's betrayal? As the coffee dripped, she prepared a simple breakfast, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced. Each clink of the dishes was a reminder of how routine felt shattered. She glanced at the clock. Time was slipping away. She didn't want to keep Lily waiting, but she also wasn't ready to face the truth. With a determined breath, she grabbed her jacket and strode out the door. The chill of the morning air was a welcome distraction, grounding her as she walked through the familiar neighborhood. The sound of leaves crunching underfoot reminded her life went on, even when it felt like hers was crumbling. When Sarah reached the cafe, she spotted Lily sitting at their usual table, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. The sight of her friend offered solace, and she felt the tension ease just a bit. But as she approached, she noticed Lily's expression was serious. The warmth of the moment shifted under that weight. Hey, Sarah said, sliding into the chair across from her. Thanks for coming on such short notice. Of course, Lily replied, her voice steady but soft. I know this is hard for you. I've been thinking a lot about Mark in the community. We're all feeling that strain, aren't we? Yeah. Sarah swirled her coffee, watching the steam rise. I don't get it. How could he do this? He was always the guy looking out for everyone. There's a lot we don't know, Lily said, leaning in. But we can't let anger cloud our judgment. We need to be ready to listen and find a way forward. A knot tightened in Sarah's chest. Listening? To what? She felt betrayed, confused, and raw. The image of Mark, a man she admired, flashed in her mind, now tainted by the truth. What if there's more to it? What if he had reasons we can't understand? Exactly, Lily said, eyes searching Sarah's for understanding. Maybe he thought he was protecting us. I mean, every decision comes from somewhere. It's not about excusing his actions, but understanding them. That's the first step to healing. I don't know if I can just forgive him, Sarah replied, shaking her head. So much bigger than that. He put everyone at risk. Lily reached across the table, her hand resting reassuringly on Sarah's. I understand. And it's valid to feel that way. But think about the community. We need to approach this together, or we might lose everything we've built. I want to help, Sarah said, her voice trembling. But can we really rebuild after something like this? A pensive silence enveloped them. The clatter of cups and conversations around them faded into the background. In that moment, Sarah realized she was caught in a transformative moment, not just for Mark, but for herself and the community they cherished. The weight of leadership felt heavy on her shoulders, but it was also empowering. What if we organize a community meeting? Lily suggested gently. An open forum where everyone can share, and Mark can explain himself. The thought sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. A meeting would draw everyone in, their hopes and fears laid bare. But what if it backfired? What if the community split even further? I'll think about it, Sarah said carefully, her heart still racing at the prospect. But I can't promise I'll be strong enough for this. Lily grinned softly. You don't have to be strong alone. We'll face this together. Just take the first step. As they sat sipping their coffee, uncertainty tightened its grip, but there was a flicker of possibility growing. Maybe opening up a conversation was the key. Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of how to navigate what lay ahead. Could they really confront Mark, challenge the situation, and still hold their community together? The potential for healing was within reach, but would they be brave enough to seize it? And as they continued to discuss their options, Sarah felt the stirrings of something deep within. Was it hope? Would she find the courage to lead them through this storm? Tomorrow promised to be critical, and the weight of that possibility hung thick in the air. The next day dawned with an unsettling stillness. The sky seemed heavier, burdened with all the questions swirling in Sarah's mind. She could hardly swallow her breakfast. The knot in her stomach twisted tighter with every bite. Having decided to move forward with Lily's plan, she knew she needed to gather her thoughts and cultivate the strength to address the community. As she dressed, she recalled the warmth of their shared coffee and the bond of friendship with Lily. That comfort felt so far away now. She glanced at herself in the mirror, searching for the resolve she hoped to find. With each glance, she reminded herself of who she had been, an anchor for everyone around her, and the person she needed to be now. The hour came, and Sarah made her way to the community center. The old brick building had seen countless meetings, celebrations, and even heartaches. Today held an air of anticipation, a palpable tension as residents filed in, some hesitations visible on their faces. She felt the weight of their collective gaze, each person carrying their own burden of emotion: confusion, anger, sadness. Lily appeared beside her, offering a nod of encouragement. "You can do this," she whispered just before pushing through the doors to the warmth of the bustling room. "We're all here for support." Finding a spot in front of a gathering crowd, Sarah cleared her throat. "Thank you all for being here. I know this is difficult, but we need to talk about Mark." Whispers flitted through the crowd, an undercurrent of anxiety rippling from one face to the next. Sarah could feel the tension knotting in her own chest. Would they hear her? Would they still trust her? Mark meant a lot to many of us. I know he's made choices that hurt not just himself but all of us as a community. We have questions, we need answers. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. This is a safe space to express our feelings and to listen. But we also need to listen to Mark. With shaky breaths, she felt a wave of emotions course through her, almost tangible in the air as the community absorbed her words. "Why should we? He's betrayed us," someone shouted from the back. "Isn't it worth understanding why he did what he did?" Sarah replied, even as her own doubts whispered in her mind. "Can we really heal if we don't know what we're healing from?" Moments stretched, silence filling the room before another voice rang out. "You want us to trust him again? He's already shown he can't be trusted." Tension rose like a tide, crashing against the fragile hope Sarah had tried to build. "I don't expect you to trust him now," Sarah said, fighting the panic creeping into her chest. "I'm not here to excuse his actions, but maybe if we listen we can find a way to avoid more pain in the future." The murmurs grew, conversations blossoming around the concerns for their community. Sarah looked to Lily, who gave a faint smile, a glimmer of support amidst the chaos. What if Mark doesn't want to face the music? Or what if he has nothing to say that can make this okay? The fear sat heavily with Sarah as she faced the crowd, recognizing the very real tension that simmered just beneath the surface. "Let us give him the chance to speak. But listen, if it doesn't sit right with you, voice that. Your feelings matter, and we can navigate this together." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the entrance. The crowd turned as Mark made his way inside, his presence a double-edged sword. Past friends turned into strangers, watched him with narrowed eyes, the energy in the room crackling like a live wire. This was it. The moment of truth stood before her, and she felt her heart race. Could they really confront Mark? Or would this unravel everything they had ever built together? As Sarah stood there, the community split down the middle between those willing to hear him out, and those who wanted nothing to do with him. She realized the storm she'd been fearing was just beginning. And as Mark raised his hand to speak, a torrent of emotions washed over her. Could forgiveness and understanding truly bloom in a moment like this? Or would it be crushed under the weight of past betrayals? Mark stood at the front, uncertainty written across his face as he looked out at the crowd. The air crackled with tension, heavy enough to drown in. Sarah felt her heart pound against her ribcage. Everyone was waiting, holding their breaths, 1,000 eyes narrowing, judging. Would he crumble or rise to meet them? "Thank you for letting me speak," Mark began, his voice low yet clear. "I know I don't deserve it, but I have things I want to say." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was met with skepticism, some shaking their heads, others with eyes wide open in disbelief. Yet amid the disbelief, Sarah saw a flicker of something else. Curiosity. Maybe they all wanted to hear his side, if only just to know the reasons behind his actions. "I lost myself," he continued, glancing at Sarah, then fixed on the crowd. I let my need for approval, my fear of failure, lead me right over the cliff. I know that's no excuse, but it's the truth. I hurt all of you. I hurt myself. I made selfish decisions. His words hung in the air, as if accepting the blame, yet there was an honesty there that resonated with Sarah. She wasn't there to absolve him, but she could still feel empathy creeping into her heart, softening the edges of her resolve. Why should we believe anything you say now? That familiar voice called out again, this time louder, vibrating with bitterness. It was the same voice that had shouted before. You could have come clean when it mattered. Mark sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. You're not wrong, he admitted. I ask for your patience, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. I never meant to hurt you. I've been working on myself, and I want to make this right. Make it right? Spat a woman in the front, arms crossed defiantly. You think you can just waltz in here and say a few words and everything will be fine? Sarah felt the heat of her own anger flare up in her chest. They were all hurting, but wasn't that the point? They needed to be heard. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to the center, her heart racing. Mark may have made mistakes, but he's here now, a step forward. If we close ourselves off completely, we risk losing more than we already have. We risk losing our chance for growth. The tension shifted slightly, a few nods of agreement mixed with expressions of skepticism. Sarah felt encouraged by the reaction, sensing she wasn't alone in wanting to navigate through the fear. Trust is built, not given, Mark said, his voice steadier now, fueled by her courage. I know I have to work for that, show you all that I can be better. I don't expect anyone to take me at my word, but I want to prove it. Gradually, the room transformed from a den of anger into something else, a crucible of possibilities. Sarah's heart fluttered with a strange mix of hope and fear. If they could confront this together, maybe healing could begin. Mark took a step forward. An unexpected silence fell over the crowd. Everyone seemed caught between wanting answers and wanting to trust again. Just when it felt like the atmosphere was shifting, a loud crash startled everyone. A chair toppled over in the back, and the crowd murmured in surprise. They turned to find a group of newcomers rushing in, faces pale, urgency written all over them. Something's happened, we need to talk. One of them exclaimed, breathless. Sarah's stomach dropped. What now? The moment of truth wasn't just with Mark. It was teetering on the edge of something much bigger. The realization hit her hard. Were they truly ready to confront their past? Or would calamity disrupt the fragile threads of hope they were trying to weave? And at the front, under the weight of anticipation, she couldn't help but wonder what could they possibly reveal that would change everything again? The newcomers hurried to the front, urgency lighting up their faces. Sarah's heart raced at the sight of their panic. Mark turned to look at them, confusion evident in his eyes. Who are you? What's wrong? He asked, stepping forward with an instinctive need to protect. One of the newcomers, a tall man with messy hair and shaky hands, spoke up. It's about the finances. We've uncovered something. Something you all need to know. He glanced back at the group behind him, one woman holding a file tightly, as if it were a lifeline. Whispers erupted among the crowd. A hushed tension settled in. Mark's expression shifted from disbelief to concern. What do you mean? He asked, his voice rough around the edges. The woman with the file took a deep breath, her eyes darting nervously as she approached him. The company, the fund you were dealing with, it was never what it seemed. You've been misled. We found evidence of mismanagement and worse, deception. The word hung heavily in the air. Sarah felt her breath hitch. Deception. The atmosphere shifted again, but this time it was darker. Murmurs of disbelief and anger swirled through the crowd. After everything that's happened, you're telling me he's been lying this whole time? Shouted the woman in the front again, her voice trembling with fury. No, Mark interjected, his face pale. That's not true. I didn't know anything about this. But doubt filled the space like smoke. Sarah watched the faces of the townsfolk as they began to process the information. Hope flickered, but fear was feeding off the uncertainty. Was this another turn in a long line of betrayals? Are you saying I'm still at fault? Mark's plea sounded more desperate now. A man pleading his case with the world crumbling around him. I was trying to do my best. Please, we have to talk this out. What's done is done, shouted a voice from the back. puncturing the words like a knife. How can we trust you if you didn't even know what was happening under your watch? Sarah felt the anger swell in the room like a storm. It was all too much. They were so close to bridging the gap, but now this. She needed to ground them. Everyone, please. Sarah's own voice broke through the chaos. We can't let this derail everything. We need to hear each other. We need to dig into this, not run away. I know it's hard, but we owe it to ourselves. Do we, Sarah? Another voice replied, full of cynicism. Do we owe it to trust someone who has already let us down? A weight settled heavily on her chest. She wanted to reassure them, to ignite their belief in redemption once more. But doubts numbed the air. How could she push against a wave of fear that threatened to sweep them all away? The newcomers exchanged worried looks. The man who had initially spoken stepped forward again. There's more. Someone has been pulling the strings behind the scenes. We think there are people involved who didn't want Mark to know. And they might still be out there. Eerie silence blanketed the room. The vague threat loomed, like a shadow lurking at the edges. Who were these people? And what did they want? As Sarah searched Mark's eyes, a mix of confusion and desperation reflected back at her. The raw emotions surrounding them churned, and she could tell his very foundation was shaken. Just when it seemed they might spiral into disarray, Mark steadied himself, his eyes narrowing into a steely resolve. Then we will face this together. I won't lose anyone else. But even as he spoke with certainty, Sarah felt an unsettled knot in her stomach. What had they just walked into? And far more chilling, who were the real culprits still out there? A flicker of dread passed between them. The coming storm was barely beginning, and uncertainty loomed large. What truths would they uncover next? The room buzzed with a mixture of confusion and trepidation as Mark's declaration hung in the air. Was it really possible for them to join forces against an unseen enemy? Sarah's heart raced. They had barely begun to address the fracture within their community, and now another layer of complexity had opened up. Are we really prepared for something like this? Someone murmured from the back of the room, anxiety edging their voice. A collective unease rippled through the crowd. It felt as if they had just wrestled with their own demons only to find darker entities lurking behind the curtain. Maybe this is an opportunity to rebuild, Mark said, his voice ringing with unexpected strength, though the uncertainty still flickered in his eyes. If there are people out there manipulating the situation, we owe it to ourselves to uncover the truth. Together, we might be able to figure this out. Together? The words seemed to bounce off the walls like a ping-pong ball. How could they think about unity when trust had been shattered? But Sarah felt a small spark ignite within her. What if Mark is right? She said, forcing herself to meet the eyes of her neighbors. What if the real enemy is the very deception we've seen? It's time to shine the light on everything hidden in the shadows. The ones in the back murmured their concerns, but Sarah could see some nodding in agreement. Perhaps there could be strength in pooling their resources, courage in facing their fear together. It wouldn't be easy, but was easy what they needed? Let us form a committee, she suggested, raising her voice to try to pierce through the uncertainty. We can investigate together. Let us create action, a path forward. Mark can help us piece together what happened, what's happening. But isn't it his fault that we're in this situation? Another voice echoed, sharper than the rest, cutting through her optimism. Why should we even trust him again? As doubt clawed at her, Sarah inhaled deeply, focusing on their faces, the fear, the hope, the misunderstanding pooling in their expressions. It's time we decide who we are. Are we people who allow betrayal to define us? Or are we resilient enough to rise above it? The crowd fell silent, weighing the question like a precious stone. Mark swallowed hard. I can't pretend to be the man I was before, he confessed, his voice steady. All I ask is the chance to prove I can do better. Not just for me, but for all of us. I view it as a shared mission. The others exchanged hesitant glances, uncertain whether to embrace this newfound unity or retreat into distrust. What if they were inviting further harm? But Sarah knew the only path forward lay in vulnerability. They needed to feel the fabric of community revive beneath them, even if it meant facing discomfort head-on. Then let us form this committee, Sarah reiterated, her tone growing more assured. Let us pool our resources, our strengths. We need to protect each other. Let us work together to find the truth behind these hidden manipulations. Murmurs began to rise again, a blend of acceptance and fear. Slowly, a few neighbors began to step forward, nodding in agreement. "I'll help," one elderly neighbor said, her hands trembling slightly, but determination lit her eyes. "I might not be much use, but together we can figure this out." One by one, others added their voices, until a chorus of "Me Too" emerged, each person stepping forward to shoulder the burden. Each heartbeat in resonance, they began shedding their individual fears in favor of a shared purpose. As determination permeated the room, a sense of unity began to rise like the warm light of dawn. Sarah felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. This was more than just a response to betrayal. It felt like salvation. Amidst the chaos, a seed had been planted, one of resilience, understanding, and growth. "Tomorrow we meet back here," Mark said, his voice stronger now. "We'll start drafting how to confront what lies ahead, not just with disagreements but with knowledge." As the meeting closed, people began to depart, exchanging glances of cautious optimism. Sarah stood at the door watching them leave, their faces illuminated with newfound hope. "Hey," a familiar voice called out. It was Lily, her smile bright against the fading sunlight. "You did great." Sarah felt the warmth stir in her heart. "We're not just fixing Mark's mistakes," she replied softly. "We're unearthing a whole new foundation for our community." Tomorrow would bring challenges, and their past wouldn't disappear. But, with a collective resolve, they could reshape their narrative in something more authentic. As Sarah closed the door, she felt that familiar spark of purpose surge within. Was this what hope felt like? Now their journey was just beginning. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It seriously makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this ending. I want to know how this chapter hit you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.